I remember the exact moment my world appeared to collapse. It was midday, and I was in the middle of drafting an email to a potential client. My phone buzzed on the desk, rattling the coffee mug next to it. I glanced at the screen. An incoming text from my wife, Victoria. She rarely texted me in the middle of the workday. Usually our messages were short, to the point. A quick grocery list, a let's do dinner with your mother on Sunday, or perhaps a brief where are you. So, when I saw a block of text from her, my heart gave an uncomfortable lurch. My mind scrolled through possibilities, maybe something about a trip, or a casual request about which brand of dog food to buy, but it wasn't any of those ordinary things. Instead, it was a message that read, I'm leaving you. Don't bother calling, begging, or crying. It won't work. I have someone wealthier, more influential, and frankly better in every way. You were just a stepping stone, darling. You should have known. Good luck with your pitiful life. At first, a surprising kind of calm descended over me. There was no rush of confusion, no unstoppable wave of heartbreak. It was more like a quiet, steady hum inside my chest, because deep down, I had known this day was coming. That text message was a meticulously sharpened sword, thrust with the kind of precision only someone who knew you intimately could manage. Victoria and I had been married for 4 years. And in those years, I had watched her climb, socially, professionally, always seeking the next rung, the next advantage. At first, I admired her ambition. She was the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted and often got it. Looking back, I guess I should have realized how easily I could be cast aside once I was no longer useful. I'd suspected her affair for some time. Our conversations had grown increasingly transactional. Her schedule was always jam-packed with business dinners or networking events, but the sparkle in her eyes when she returned always looked more cunning than excited. There were nights when I could sense the hush of phone calls in the next room, those low, secret whispers that ended abruptly when I came near. My suspicion was no random flare of jealousy. I observed, I pieced things together, and I waited. But hearing, or reading, the final cold confirmation still stung. Even anticipating a blow doesn't quite dull its immediate impact. Yet I didn't rage or panic. Instead, I stared at her text for a full minute, calmly reread every arrogant word, and then I did something I think many people would find strange. I set down my phone, finished that draft email to my client, and pressed send. Business as usual. To understand why I remained calm, you'd need to know something about me. I'm a planner. I always have been. While Victoria excelled in seizing opportunities in the moment, I excelled in observing the field, analyzing it, and making strategic moves to protect myself. It was how I built my modest consulting business out of a single freelancing gig in my early 20s. It was also how I approached our marriage, although in retrospect, it might be that I was planning for a betrayal before there was even cause to. In the minutes that followed her text, I composed myself. I refused to be taken by surprise. A million thoughts raced. How did I feel? Strangely, I felt relief. The constant guessing and waiting had ended. Now there was clarity. The sadness, the heartbreak. Oh, I recognized they were there, flickering in the background, but I had a plan. I had everything I needed at the ready. I just hadn't told Victoria. A year earlier, I'd noticed small, telling clues. A hush in Victoria's voice during late-night calls, a credit card statement that included charges at swanky restaurants when she was supposedly working late, a faint whiff of expensive cologne that certainly didn't belong to me. Being a consultant, I understood the wisdom of verifying assumptions before launching a full confrontation, so I quietly reached out to a friend of mine who was a private investigator. He owed me a favor. Every so often, I'd get small updates from him. Pictures of Victoria entering a hotel lobby with a tall, impeccably dressed man. Bills for outings to exclusive clubs I'd never set foot in. Luxurious gifts she clearly hid or claimed were freebies from vendors. As each piece of evidence rolled in, I was hurt, no doubt about that, but it also gave me an edge. I started slowly removing Victoria's name from certain business documents, transferring shared savings into individual accounts, and carefully collecting every scrap of evidence that showed her affair was ongoing, and not just a brief lapse. I'd also stored away all the text messages that hinted at her deception. I prepared meticulously. In my mind, if she was going to leave me, I wouldn't be stranded. And if we ever reached divorce court, I would have everything I needed in black and white. She, of course, had no idea. Victoria was too occupied with her new pursuit, a wealthier, more influential man, as she so kindly put it, to notice me quietly rewriting our story behind the scenes. Whenever she gloated about how sophisticated her new friends were, I'd nod neutrally and say I had pressing deadlines that week and couldn't join her for dinner. She always sneered at the mention of my deadline, as if it were a trivial attempt at success. Meanwhile, I kept building my consulting network, forging new partnerships, and setting aside resources she couldn't touch. In the days following that fateful text message, Victoria made a dramatic show of leaving. She swept into the house one afternoon, her face set in a plastic grin, and spent an hour packing a few suitcases with the glamorous outfits she had acquired. She didn't bother to pack the comfortable old sweatpants or the practical shoes. Those things, apparently, were beneath her. She only wanted the best, ready to move on to her new life with her wealthier, more influential beau. "I hope you have a decent lawyer," she said in a flippant tone, throwing one last glance at me from the doorway. "Because, I'll be taking half, at least." I offered her a polite nod and watched as she strutted out. No tears, no dramatic confrontation. My heart ached, but I let her see none of it. She expected me to be devastated, perhaps to beg her to stay or break down in a fit of anger. She expected me to quake under the threat of a ruinous divorce. Instead, I just stood there, arms loose at my sides, not even betraying a frown. I remember the look of confusion that flickered across her face, just a quick second, before she replaced it with a superior smirk. Then she turned away, her expensive heels clicking on the front porch like a final flourish to her spectacle of departure. This was Victoria's greatest weakness, her overconfidence. She had lived in a bubble of her own making, where her charm and cunning always outmaneuvered people. To her, I was a mild creature, someone who was convenient as a stepping stone, but too gentle to fight back. In her head, she had already won. Victoria's new man, let's call him Damien, was a high-rolling investor. He boasted about never losing a deal. He also, I discovered through my own professional network, had a tendency to jump into risky ventures, thinking he could outsmart the market. For a while he'd succeeded. Luck was on his side. But luck, as most wise people know, has a harsh sense of humor. About 6 months after Victoria left, news began circulating about a spectacular failure in one of Damien's biggest investment ventures. Insider trading allegations were swirling. The SEC was investigating. Suddenly, his fortune that had seemed bottomless was in serious jeopardy. By that time, I was already well into a new stride of success. The consulting firm I'd built from scratch had secured a series of lucrative contracts with a trio of national companies. While Victoria was busy traveling in lavish circles, sipping champagne, and flaunting her new lifestyle on social media, I had been methodically growing my client list and even hiring a small team to help with the workload. I'd stepped out of the small home office I once occupied and moved into a modest downtown suite. It wasn't a gargantuan corporate tower suite, but it was bright, professional, and alive with the energy of possibility. Meanwhile, Damien's empire was cracking. And because Victoria had tied her fortune so tightly to his, burning bridges with her old connections, dismissing her former circle of mere commoners, she found herself standing on precarious ground. She posted fewer and fewer grandiose pictures on social media. Then she went silent altogether. Rumors started that Damien was trying to sell off his holdings to pay mounting legal fees. Victoria, who had presumably expected to ascend further into the upper echelons of society, suddenly found her fancy network evaporating. I heard from an old acquaintance that she'd shown up to a gala, only to find her name conspicuously absent from the VIP list, forcing her to stand in a general queue. Worse, the fashionable crowd she once mingled with cast sideways glances and whispered behind her back. The pair who had once openly bragged about their unstoppable rise were rapidly becoming social pariahs, caught in the stench of scandal and failure. Of course, I didn't know every detail of Victoria's troubles, but the broad strokes were easy enough to glean. I won't pretend I didn't feel a small surge of satisfaction. After all, she had once looked at me with that dismissive, cruel sneer and told me I was merely a rung on her ladder to the top. But my greatest triumph wasn't watching her downfall. It was the steady growth of my own success. By the time a year had passed since she walked out, I had tripled my client roster. I'd formed partnerships with other consultants in related fields, marketing, IT solutions, financial analysis, so we could provide holistic services to corporations that needed a one-stop solution. The modest downtown suite had grown into 3 adjoining offices, complete with a conference room where we pitched to Fortune 500 companies. And best of all, while Victoria had threatened to take half of everything, she soon learned the harsh truth. Legally, she had far less claim than she ever realized, given the records I'd gathered on her infidelity and the well-documented separate nature of my finances. We finalized our divorce in a surprisingly uneventful court session. She showed up, expecting either to outmaneuver me or to watch me crumble. But every detail had been cleanly laid out by my lawyer, assets separated, joint properties handled neatly, and a thick file of evidence as a fallback if she tried to dispute. In short, it was almost laughably one-sided, and her attorney must have seen the writing on the wall from the first minute of negotiations. She walked away with far less than she had come for, and certainly not the lion's share she'd bragged she'd get. There was no dramatic breakdown from her, just a silent, furious glare. She left the courthouse as though she couldn't believe I had outmaneuvered her. I continued my life with a quieter sense of contentment. I didn't become a billionaire, nor did I develop any illusions of grandeur, but I was doing well enough that I bought a comfortable new home, a place with a wraparound porch and a view of a small lake just outside the city. I also dedicated more time to myself. I traveled, I discovered a passion for painting, and I spent more time reading, something Victoria had always found pointless unless it advanced her image. It must have been 2 years after that fateful text when I heard a hesitant knock at my front door. It was late afternoon, and I'd been sitting at my desk reviewing a contract when the sound startled me. My dog Rusty perked up, wagging his tail but staying by my side. I opened the door to find none other than Victoria standing there. She was thinner than I remembered, her once meticulously styled hair now looking a bit lackluster, as though time and stress had worn away her polish. She wore an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello, Stephen," she said quietly, clutching the strap of a worn handbag. I took a moment to absorb the sight. The last time I'd seen her was in that courthouse, rage burning behind her eyes as she stepped away with so much less than she'd wanted. Now she seemed almost meek. "Hi, Victoria," I replied. I neither invited her in nor closed the door. I simply waited. She glanced around awkwardly, noting the landscaped yard, the tidy walkway, and glimpses of the interior behind me, warm, welcoming, and so very different from the small suburban house we had shared before. I wanted to talk," she began, fidgeting with her handbag strap. "Things have been tough." She lowered her gaze as though hoping I'd extend an olive branch. That's when Rusty trotted forward, sniffed around her shoes, and then sat, gazing up at her. She tried to smile at him, a weak imitation of the radiant smile she'd once used to charm entire boardrooms. "Look," she continued, her voice dropping to a husky murmur, "I've had some time to think. And I realize I might have made a mistake, leaving you the way I did. Damien, well, it turns out he wasn't who I thought. He used me, and we had this big scandal." She paused, as if uncertain how much I knew. I said nothing, letting the silence speak volumes. She let out a resigned sigh. "Stephen, I know I was cruel, but we had some good times, didn't we?" Her lips curved in a faint attempt at a smile. "Maybe we can start over. I miss you." I studied her face, recalling the text message that had ended our marriage. I recalled every instance of her sneering at my supposed inadequacies, every brag about how she deserved better. And I remembered the months of heartbreak I had carefully concealed, the nights I lay awake wondering how my love had turned so toxic. In that moment, I realized I felt no anger toward her, only a sense of clarity. And yes, a sliver of amusement, because all those things she'd taken for granted, my steady nature, my work ethic, my quiet determination, had become the very forces that elevated me to a better life. Meanwhile, her restless ambition, unchecked by caution or loyalty, had led her here, standing uncertainly on my doorstep, asking for a second chance she would never receive. I shook my head, a small, genuinely regretful smile on my face. "I'm sorry things have been hard," I said gently, "but there's no going back." She blinked as if she couldn't believe the words. "Well, what? Stephen, come on." She gave a breathy laugh that had once worked on me as an appeal to my empathy. "You can't seriously be turning me away. I know I messed up, but—" "I'm not angry," I interrupted, wanting to spare us both a pointless argument. I've moved on, Victoria. The life I have now, it's peaceful. I don't want to lose that." She opened her mouth to retort, maybe to remind me how she thought we once belonged together, but the look in my eyes must have told her it was futile. I'd already found my peace and closure. No further discussion would change that. She nodded slowly, her eyes flickering with hurt, and perhaps a small amount of realization. I saw in her face what might have been the first genuine glimpse of regret. "Right," she managed. "I understand." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and I believed her. Even someone as proud as Victoria can see, at some point, that certain breaches of trust can never be fully mended. She glanced behind me into the living room once more, taking in the comfortable furniture, the soft painting above the mantel, the sense of calm that seemed to radiate from the space. For a moment, I wondered if she was thinking about how she had undervalued everything I offered in the pursuit of something flashier. Then her gaze dropped to Rusty, who nuzzled my leg protectively. Finally, she backed away from the threshold, turning slowly toward her car. I watched as she went, feeling no malice, only a quiet satisfaction in how life had turned out. She had left me once, mocking me with the words, "stepping stone." But in reality, I had been the foundation of my own future success. She had overestimated her cunning and underestimated my resolve. When she finally disappeared down the driveway, I shut the door. My eyes roamed the cozy interior of my home, and I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips. A light, relieved laugh escaped me, and Rusty wagged his tail at my side, as if he, too, sensed that a chapter had finally closed. In the days that followed, Victoria didn't reappear. Perhaps she thought better of it, or maybe she truly understood that no matter how much she begged or pleaded, I was no longer the meek husband she'd once discarded. My life continued in the direction I'd chosen, full of purposeful work, genuine friendships, and new experiences that enriched my days. I never publicly gloated about what had happened. Vengeance wasn't something I reveled in, but that didn't mean I felt no sense of poetic justice. Victoria had forsaken a committed husband for a fast track to social and financial glory. In the end, she lost it all when her new partner's empire crumbled. And there I was, ironically reaping the rewards of slow, steady effort, just as I had always done. In reflecting on it now, I realized she gave me a gift by leaving. She liberated me from a partnership that was never truly a partnership, and she gave me the push I needed to focus on the path I'd always wanted to take. I could finally embrace my ambitions without the drag of her constant need for status and approval. And so, years later, I remain grateful for my life as it is, calm, successful enough to enjoy comforts without losing myself, and surrounded by people who value me for more than what I can do for them. Sometimes, late at night, I stand on my porch overlooking the moonlit lake, and I think of Victoria's final words from that text message. You were just a stepping stone, darling. A stepping stone I may have been, but one that paved my own way to a better place. And when she came back to my door, seeking solace or a quick return to the life she once scorned, all I could do was smile. For once, I was the one who held the power to say no. I closed the door that day, laughing, not out of cruelty, but out of a joyful realization that I'd outgrown the role she assigned me. The stepping stone had become the master of his own bridge, carrying himself to new horizons, leaving her on the other side, too late to catch up.